So I was debating on whether or not to create a video on this, but after trying to get this going and installing the Smittybilt tire carrier, figured it'd probably be a good idea to show some good pointers and references and things like that to get this installed, because I've already tried starting to install it and I got the pivot point on, but the bracket right here is just too far out towards the camera, and so I'm going to have to do some readjustments. And there's some other things that I wanted to point out in trying to put this on. So something good to note here is I am installing this with the factory bumper. So this is the 10th anniversary edition steel bumper. Okay, so remove the spare to give me a little bit more room to work when pulling off the bumper. So I got the bumper back off. Some things I want to note. You will lose the tow hook from the passenger side. So that's got to be removed in order to get those two bolts in. And as you can see, it would interfere right here if you wanted to have that tow hook. So you've got to remove that. All right, so when I put this on, I had it set like this. And if you notice, the pivot bracket is not flush with the frame rail. So what you've got to do is you've got to push this back so that it lines up with the frame rail. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to place the bumper back on just to make sure that the pivot point does fit through the hole of the bumper. With a 10th anniversary edition bumper, you're going to have to order the mounting bracket. And so it comes with basically this piece here that slides into the frame rail, and then it comes with your hardware here. I think there's 5 pieces, and then basically this that's got this long extension on it and a welded nut to this plate. And so what you've got to do on this front bolt here, so you put your bolt in before you put in any of these other bolts. So you put this bolt in first, and then you've got to take the and as you can see, I've already got my nut in there, but what you've got to do is you've got to go through on the back side of this, and as you can see, you've got to slide the bracket that has the nut welded to it. You've got to slide it through this frame rail and basically hold it in place with this long wire and start getting it threaded on that bolt. And then once you get it on and tight, basically what I did is I just started jimmying that wire until it snapped off. And so now I've got that that welded bolt and plate in there attached to the nut. So now that I've got all of this on and installed and this pushed back, I'm going to make sure it aligns well with the bumper and then start tightening down that bolt, these 2 bolts, and then there's one on the inside rail here, that bolt. And then I am going to start drilling through the frame rail on the bottom to get the final bolt, in which I'm going to have to use this and basically do this number here until it lines up and get that bolt on to this welded nut. All right, I got the bumper back on. See, it lined up pretty centered in the existing hole of the bumper, and that's with this lined up flushed. If you remember in the last clip, it lined up pretty flush to the frame rail. The only problem I have now is this is not snapping into place because this is still too far forward. Me personally, I'm not going to worry about it. But if you can, when you're installing yours, try to keep the pivot bracket even further back off that frame rail. So that's where we are now. And then next is to take off the existing tire carrier. All right, so I got the existing tire holder off the back of the tailgate, and part of the instructions says to remove the tailgate vent. So before I took that off, I thought they were talking about this vent. So I went ahead and pulled that off, thinking they were wanting me to do something with the tailgate, or I'm sorry, the rear brake light. So don't do like me and don't take that off, because I don't think it needs to be taken off at this point. They're talking about this vent. So once that comes off, then I'm gonna put on this plate here with the existing hardware that was used with the factory tire holder. So make sure you keep those bolts. So I'm gonna put that back on, remove that first, and then put that back on. So if you're trying to follow me on the actual install instructions from Smittybilt, I'm on step 11 at this point. And these are the pieces that I believe they're calling for you to use. In the instructions, it basically says to use bolts, washers, and then this bump stop. So it never says anything about these nuts, these nylon nuts. So I'm not sure if I'm supposed to use those yet. So what I'm gonna do is just lightly thread those on, just in case I need to remove them. So now I'm gonna install that bump stop right there. So I got this in place, and I think the one thing why they don't have you tightening those down is, as you can see, this is adjustable. And as you get the actual tire carrier on, I think you've got to line this up to where that cross member is going to fall right into this C-cup, and then tighten those down. Steps 12 through I believe it's 15. There goes my dog's feet. Have you basically assembling the tire gate linkage. Mine was already pre-assembled, so what's going to happen next is this is going to be installed here with a bolt and a nut. So I'll go ahead and get that installed. So the turnbuckle, whatever, the linkage, gate linkage is installed. Tightened it down. The next piece is to install the stainless steel plate. I think this is only for if you have a Smittybilt bumper. Since I'm using my existing stock bumper, as you can see, this thing just doesn't fit. So I'm suspecting that this was not made for the stock bumper, so I'm going to skip that step. It looks like I'm going to have a nice little unfinished hole here. Next step is to install the main tire carrier into the pivot point, and they provide you with some shims to shim it up if you need to. My thinking is, though, I've heard a lot of reviews saying that this tire carrier rattles. So I'm going to use at least one on here and see what that does. My thinking is the more you use, the more opportunity for a rattle. So I'm just going to try to use one, see if that's going to work. I have a feeling it's going to depend on where this lines up. So I'm going to install this and let you know how that went. The spacers they provide to you, as you can see I have one in right now, are supposed to help you line up the tire carrier with your bump stops, so that they obviously so they hit and line up correctly. And then the other part that I just installed was this turnbuckle. Obviously you can adjust the length of the turnbuckle with this piece here and unscrewing these and then tighten them down, etc., etc. But you need to make sure that it will line up here. You can see mine does. If I had a free hand, I'd show you. Anyway, so however many spacers you put in here, you'll have to put one on the bottom as well when you put on the castle nut. So the next step, which was confusing to me because the part was already installed, at least I'm narrowing it down that it has. So number 18, step 18 is telling you to put in the flanged sleeve bushing, which I believe is this brass fitting here that's already installed on mine. And I'd show you underneath, but I don't think it's necessary. So after you're adjusted right, it's time to put on the castle nut and the cotter pin with a gate pin spacer. A tire gate pin spacer is what they call it. So these were the top shims. These are the tire gate pin spacers. So you need to install the same number, which is 1 for me, tire gate pin spacer as the same number of top spacer, 1/8 inch spacer that you used on the top of this thing. So to give you a picture so there's not confusion. So however many of those black spacers you put in, you need to put in the same amount of spacers on the bottom. So I'm gonna get ready to install all this and tighten it down. When securing the tire carrier, putting it on with the castle nut, don't forget to use this washer here like I did. So as you can see, here's the spacer, or I'm sorry, as they call it, the tire gate pin spacer. And then this is the pin capture washer. So make sure you install that. The one thing I want to point out here, you see I've got the cotter pin through the bolt, but my castle nut is screwed on so far up, it's not really falling in the silos of the castle nut. I think it still serves the purpose because it's not going to let the castle nut back off because it's pretty darn flush against it. I was having some issues getting that cotter pin fed through. If you need to open the tire carrier, it's going to spin this bolt and allow you to feed that through and get access to it. So the next thing I'm going to do is get my needle nose pliers and bend that out so this pin stays in. Just finished up number 18. I put that cotter pin in that castle nut, and now I'm going on over to number 19. So you're supposed to install this turnbuckle in on the other side of the tire carrier, like so. But at this point, which is not in the instructions, you need to line this bump stop up with the actual gate. See if I can get a picture of it. And at this point, that's where you make that adjustment, and then tighten it down. The linkage is now tight, both here and on the back, which you can't see, sorry. But from some of the things I've read, it says to keep the, make sure everything's really tight. So make sure this linkage is pulling this in, your tire carrier in really tight against your bump stops so that it doesn't rattle. So the next step is to, so number 21 is to put in this, this cap, which is easy, just plops in place, and then put in the set screw. So as you can see, I've had to dump out the whole bag of hardware just to find that little set screw. Kind of give you an idea where it is. It's between the tire carrier and the tailgate. And it is, if I could focus. There we go. It's right here. So get that threaded, and then you will get the Allen wrench that's provided, or use your own, and get that tightened. Well, here's another fun one. Step number 22 says to install the Zerk fitting into the pivot pin bracket. Wasn't real sure where this sucker was going, so couldn't find it exposed out here anywhere on there. Being that it's a grease fitting, my next inclination was to look underneath. Sure enough, let me show you. If you look under here, that brass piece is the Zerk fitting, and it goes into the pivot pin, what they're calling the pivot pin, this. So it goes in right there. I just hand tighten mine because I'm afraid if I tighten it too far, the nipple is going to be hard to get to if I ever need to grease this thing. So I'm just leaving it like that. It's pretty hand tight. All right, so all of the tire carrier is assembled, tightened, ready to roll. So now we are looking at the tire mount. So the one thing with the tire mount is it doesn't tell you which way is up or down. So I had to look at a few instructions ahead to figure out that the side with the 3 holes is the top. So my particular bolt pattern is going to be, which is stock, which is going to be these 2 on the top and then this one on the bottom. And so you will put in those little press screws. Just got off the phone with Smittybilt because obviously these press bolts need to be pressed into these brackets here, like that. So I tried to put a lug nut on there and basically pull them in, and it's just too tight. So I called Smittybilt to see what I'm supposed to do here, and they told me I needed to take this to a shop and have them press in these bolts. All right, I'm back from the shop. I had those bolts pressed in to the mounting plate. Props to Kurt. Thank you for pressing those in. I haven't used this spacer for my setup just because of the back spacing my wheel. I might run into some interference if I don't use it, so I'm gonna go ahead and mount that on there, and then I'll come back and talk about mounting that piece. Okay, so the mounting bracket is on the tire, and as you can see, the this post that I'm using is pretty in line with the bracket, so I've got good clearance there. So what I'm going to do is take this bracket off now, and then tighten all these bolts down so they're nice and secure. It's just kind of hard to reach underneath there to get those tight. So I'm going to take this all off because you got to anyway for the next step in order to mount this whole assembly to the tire carrier. The next step here is to install the bracket assembly with the Rotopax holder to the actual tire carrier. Tricky part here is figuring out which set of these pre-drilled holes that you need to put your bracket onto. So what I did is I measured from my bottom lug nut hole of my tire to the outer portion of the tire, and that's 14.5 inches. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna kind of eyeball where 14.5 inches would fall, you know, close to my bumper. Obviously you don't want it touching it because rubbing can cause issues, but so 14.5 inches, that gets me up to these holes here, and then I've got to figure out what that means on this because that's offset a little bit too. So I'm gonna figure all that out, and then I'll get back on and show you how it came out. Another helpful tip, take off that turnbuckle or linkage, whatever you want to call it, when you go to tighten down those 4 bolts, because if you have it closed, you can see you're left with very limited room to try to tighten those down and hold the back end of these in place. So tip, disconnect that and then reconnect it once you're done. Rotopax is assembled. I got everything tightened down. So next step is I'm gonna put the tire on and see where I need to adjust the rear third brake light, and hopefully I can put that bracket on with the tire on. If not, I'll have to take it off again. So that will be my next step. Spare tire is now on. The next part is to put the brake light bracket on. What I did is I went ahead and set this up here to see how high I needed to set this thing, and luckily mine I can just ground it out, so I don't really have to mark where my bolts need to go. So as long as it's just sitting like that, I'm fine. Another thing I wanted to tell you, I am using a 35 1250 tire. So from the mounting standpoint of that inside bracket, I mounted it to the very bottom, and as you can see what kind of clearance I'm getting around my bumper. So if you want it higher, you can go higher. Obviously the higher you go, the better departure angle you'll have when off-roading. And then you can kind of see where it lands, you know, all around here from a height standpoint. So I'm gonna go back and put this together using, sorry about the leaves, using this hardware here with an additional 2 washers. So I've got another one for you. So the upper bracket for the brake light, because these, I don't know what you call this, but this part here and this part here, if you want to go all the way to the bottom of the bracket, they're going to interfere with your bolt heads. So you've got to at least get this inner bracket up so that you can get a socket or something around that in order to keep it from spinning. So brake light's on. All right, so opened the tailgate in order to give me more room to tighten everything down. So you got that bolt and that bolt. It's a lot easier if you open the tailgate. And back to the whole part a few steps ago where I told you to undo that so that you could get to those screws easier. You may be able to do it with the open tailgate. I don't know if it's impossible or possible, but I just thought about that when I was opening the tailgate to tighten these down. So anyway, got the third tail light on. Everything's assembled. I do not have a high lift jack, so I'm not putting on the jack mount that goes there. So that's something you need help with. All I can suggest is to look into the instructions. So I'm not doing that. Anyway, finished, complete. Thank God. Took me long enough hoops to jump through. So hope this helps you guys out.